Hi, welcome to the networking tutorial for Dr. No's Tournament Manager version 3. We'll have a quick presentation to explain some concepts and we'll jump into the demo to show you how it's done. Let's get into the presentation. The purpose of networking is because people want to display the consoles on multiple monitors. Often those monitors are in the same room, close by, but a lot of times they might be in different rooms of your house or your casino or your bar. You could accomplish this with really long monitor cables and maybe a monitor splitter or two, but most people don't have access to that kind of equipment. Most people do, however, have access to multiple computers, so that's where the client-server capability of the software really can help. Also, from the client, now you can have access to a subset of the application control. So we'll talk about what that is and how it expands over time here as version 3 lives on. All right, the requirements for networking. Obviously, you need multiple computers, but what you probably don't know is that they can be a mix of operating systems. So you can have a Macintosh server, Macintosh client, Windows server, Macintosh client. I don't care because all the information is transferred over the network. You do need to have the same version of the software installed on each computer. If you don't, the client will not be able to connect. You'll get an error pop up on the client when you try to connect. Network connectivity is a good thing to have. Whether it's wireless or wired, I don't care. You do want it to be as stable as possible, however. And then finally, a license that enables networking. Only the server requires that license, however. The clients, it doesn't matter. If the server is able to start the networking facility, then the clients are good to go. All right, what's not required for networking? I think most people assume that the server and the client are going to share things like images and audios through a file share, but that absolutely is not the case. All of that information is transferred directly over the network between the client and the server, and we'll talk about that in the demo. All right, here's a typical architecture that might be like yours, but basically we can see that the server and the clients have optional remote displays and they're connected through a router, in this case a wireless router, and they're in different rooms of the house. All right, to initialize the networking, I'll show you how to do this in the demo, but basically you start the server, go to the networking tab and start the server process. You're going to note the IP address and the port that the server is using. And then you're going to go to the client, make sure it starts in client mode. I'll talk about that more in the demo also. And then go to its networking tab, make sure it has the correct IP address and port number for the server, and tell it to start. From the client, you do have access to certain actions, and this will be expanding over time. So you can control the overlay for all displays. So if you want to display a seating chart and you're at a client, you can tell it to overlay the seating chart. That will happen on all systems. You can play a jingle from the Jingle Bank on all systems. And you also have access to the hand timer and the odds insurance calculators local to that machine. To disconnect a client, you can either do that from the server or directly from the client itself. Disconnecting gracefully will not result in retries. And let's get into the demo. All right, for the demo, quickly what I'm going to do is show you how to start the server, talk about what happens as you do that, and then we will go and start a client from scratch. So start a new client application, create a new repository, we'll have the client connect to the server, talk about what happens while that's occurring, and then go back to the server, take a look at what happened on the server from its point of view, and then we'll disconnect the client. All right, so here I am on the server, and at this point I would configure the port number if I needed to. Now I might need to do that if I have other applications running and one of them happens to be already running on this port. If that's the case, when I tried to start the server, I would get an error that would appear over here and would tell me there's a bind failure socket already in use. If that happens, just change this to a different number and then always use whatever your new number is. No big deal. All right, these are the IP addresses that the software has determined are in use by my server. So the client will be able to talk to the server via one of these two addresses here. You may have more addresses. You're probably only going to have one. Most people only have one, but I happen to be running something that makes it so I have two addresses. So let's start the server. And this is relatively simple. It says server started, tells me the time, and says the server is listening for new clients. So I haven't connected any clients at this point. Let's go over to where I have now started the application again. So this is going to be a client. I need to tell it to start as a client. Two servers can't talk to each other. And I'm going to create a new repository. And we'll call it test client 2. Save that. And then I'll tell it yes, go ahead and start. And the client has initialized, And one difference I want to make sure so you can distinguish one from the other, the server just says the name of the application. The actual client application says client up in the title bar. I mainly have that there for doing this demo so you can tell which one's which. But if we go to the networking tab, I can see that the client is not connected, and well, let's go ahead and start it. So when I start this, I would, if I needed to, configure the IP address and the server port, but those are, whoops, maybe not. No, it's not accurate, so let's go to 102. Okay, good. I could have showed you what happened when it had the wrong address, but basically you'd see it time out. Alright, so I tell it to connect, and over here on the log I can see everything that happened between the client and the server. If there's any problems, this will be very useful for debugging what might have gone on, and you would see any errors in red. So I've color coded the messages to mean different things. So green is more of a status update, purple is out messages, blue is in messages, and red is errors. Alright, so what happened? I clicked the button and it said I'm building in the inet address object, so that's internal to Java, really connected to the server, successfully connected, started a listening service. The server is going to be sending messages down to the client, so the client needs to be sitting there listening for them. There's also something on the server that's listening for messages from the client, as a matter of fact. And now the server is listening for updates. While it's doing that, it also decided to send some messages to the server. So here's my build stamp, and we'll see a response farther on down right here that says, okay, your build is good, you can continue to stay alive. Otherwise the client would exit right at that point. Client name update, so the client sends its name up to the server. I could change this at any time if I wanted to. In fact, if I do it now, you'll see a new message sent out to the server, but I'm just for the sake of time won't. Client says, please send me an update on all components, and we'll see right below this it says, okay, here's a new chip design, here's an image, here's an image, here's an image, so on and so on, any audios and dashboard definitions that need to be sent down. This way the client has all the large files it needs for display immediately. So if it says display this image on the console, the client's got it locally. Version 2, I was actually sending those on demand, and it was really stupid how I did that. So version 3 is much better for performance over a network. And then finally the client says, okay, I've just connected, I need a full update of all console data. So we'll see down here what that means. Console variable values, what is the name of the dashboard that should be displayed. Rather than sending the actual dashboard down, it just says, okay, display test, display CV, or whatever. And then the various things like seat count or buy-in count, or all that kind of stuff. Well, how much time's left in the round, so on and so on and so on. Now if I watch this log throughout the tournament, I would see console data updates come down. If on the server I actually added any new images or any new audios or created new dashboards, those would be sent down after I save them to the library. So that's all we're really going to see from the client at this point. You would just then have the client display its console and leave it alone. And again, if for any reason the network connection went away for a little bit and came back and the client disconnected, it would automatically reconnect. The only way the client will not automatically reconnect is if I tell it explicitly to disconnect right here or from the server. Alright, let's go over to the server and see what happened. On the server, we look in the server log and we see, hey, there's a client connecting. It initialized and it goes back to listening for new clients, because this part of the server mainly is about waiting for new clients to appear. Down here, when a new client does connect, it gets thrown down into this table. I could have multiple clients, and I could distinguish one from the other either by IP address, or if I set that name, I could do that also, and I can see what port I'm talking to it on if I care. Mainly, I care about the status of the client. This will change to red if the client disconnects for any reason. And then each client has a message log. So as I click on this client, I see all the messages, and this will basically reflect exactly what I see in the client. So if I need to debug a specific client, I can look in this log and see all the traffic going back and forth, and if there were any errors for any reason, I would see either an error on the client or an error on the server in this little window down here. So hopefully you will never see any errors, but if there are, this is what you can use for debugging purposes. Now from the server, I'm going to tell this client to disconnect, and there we can see a message was actually sent to the client that said kill yourself, and it went to red. And on the client we see an incoming message that says kill yourself, client closes connection to the server. That's not a bad thing. So that's a status update, that's green, and the client disconnected. Good luck.